Hello, welcome to my channel. So today we are going to go through the endocrine system. So we are continuing with our anatomy and physiology lectures. Okay, so for objectives, we are going to cover the structure of the hypothalamus, the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, the thyroid, the parathyroid, the thymus, pancreas, and of course the adrenal glands. Then in terms of functions, we are going to cover the functions of the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, the parathyroid, the thymus, the pancreas, and the adrenal glands. Then other hormones as well, and also alterations in disease. So meaning we will be talking about mention some of the disease of these glands as well. Okay, but just mentioning them. So in terms of introduction, the endocrine system is a messenger system in an organism comprising feedback loops of hormones that are released by internal glands directly into the secretory system and thus target and regulate distant organs. Then in vertebrates, the hypothalamus is the neural control center for all endocrine systems. Then in humans, the major endocrine glands are the thyroid, parathyroid, the pituitary, pineal, and the adrenal glands. And the testes in males, the ovaries in females. Then the hypothalamus, pancreas, thymus also function as endocrine glands. Then the hypothalamus and pituitary glands are the organs of the neuroendocrine system. Okay, then the functions. Let's talk about the functions now. So the first function is water equilibrium. So the endocrine system controls water equilibrium by regulating the solute concentration of the blood. Then the other function is growth, metabolism, and tissue maturation. So these are the three other functions. So the endocrine system controls growth of main tissues like the bone and muscle, and the degree of metabolism of various tissues, which aids in the maintenance of the normal body temperature and the normal mental functions. Then you have also maturation of tissues, which appears in the development of adult features and adult behavior, are also determined by the endocrine system. And the other function is, of course, to control the heart rate and the blood pressure management. Then the endocrine system assists in managing the heart rate and blood pressure and aids in preparing the body for physical motion. Those are the functions. So we are done with the functions. Then the other functions which we didn't mention previously is the immune system control. Then we all know that the endocrine system helps regulate the production and functions in immune systems. Then the other functions is reproductive function controls. So the endocrine system regulates the development and functions of the reproductive systems in males and females. Then also the other function is uterine contractions and milk release. Then of course this is coming from the endocrine system, which controls uterine contractions throughout the delivery of the newborn and stimulates milk release from the breasts in lactating females. Then of course iron management as well is played by the endocrine system. So the endocrine system regulates sodium, potassium, and calcium ions concentrations in the blood. Then the other function is blood glucose regulation. The endocrine system controls blood glucose levels and other nutrients levels in the blood. So these are some of the functions. Okay, then the other functions are direct gene activation. So being lipid soluble molecules, the steroid hormones can diffuse through plasma membranes of their target cells. Then the hormone receptor complex binds to a specific site on the cell's DNA. Then that leads to activating certain genes to transcribe messenger RNA Then the messenger RNA then is translated into the cytoplasm, resulting in the synthesis of new proteins. This is direct gene activation. Then the other function is the second messenger system. So water-soluble non-steroid hormone protein and peptide hormones are unable to enter the target cells, so instead they bind to receptors situated on the target cell's plasma membrane and utilize a second messenger system. So those are things that are functions of the endocrine system. Then these are the glands of the endocrine system we're talking about: the pineal, pituitary, hypothalamus, thyroid, parathyroid, thymus, pancreas, adrenal gland, testes. And in females, placenta, ovaries, the adrenal glands, pancreas, and the rest, of course, are just the same, except for the ovaries and placenta during pregnancy. Okay, so let's look at some anatomy. So, compared to other organs of the body, the organs of the endocrine system are small and unimpressive. However, functionally, the endocrine organs are very impressive. And when their role in maintaining body homeostasis is considered, they are true giants. The major endocrine organs of the body include the pituitary, thyroid, parathyroid, adrenal, pineal, and thymus glands, the pancreas, and the gonads as well. Then the endocrine system have no ducts. Then the other feature is that they are vesicular and commonly have intracellular vacuoles or granules that store their hormones. In contrast, exocrine glands, such as the salivary glands, sweat glands, and glands within the gastrointestinal tract, tend to be much less vesicular and have ducts or rumen. Then, another thing you also have to know is that endocrinology is a branch of internal medicine. So, for those who are going in there to do their clerkship or to do their other courses such as internal medicine, of course, we're going to learn more about the diseases of the endocrine system. So specifically, we're going to learn about endocrinology. Okay, so from what we discussed in the introduction, we know that there are two types of glands. We have the exocrine and the endocrine. So exocrine and endocrine. So exocrine glands are the glands of external secretion. These are those that secrete substances on the body surface through a duct. Then examples, we have salivary glands, mammary glands, sweat glands, and these are some of the exocrine glands. Then unlike exocrine glands, such as sweat glands, salivary glands, endocrine glands secrete their respective substances directly into the bloodstream rather than through a duct. So in short, endocrine glands are ductless. Okay. So these endocrine glands belong to the body's control system and they produce hormones which help to regulate the functions of cells and tissues. Then some glands are specific to either male, for instance, testes in males, or females, such as the ovaries. Okay, then the endocrine system also plays a major role in hormonal control mechanisms. Specifically, we are talking about the negative and the positive feedback mechanism. Okay, so let's start with the negative and positive feedback. Okay, so these feedback systems are classified into different types. So we have a positive feedback and the negative feedback mechanism. So these terms, positive and negative, are not meant to denote a good or bad response, as in, like, I've given people what to differentiate between negative feedback and positive feedback, and some were even going as far as saying positive feedback is when someone gives you a good reason, as in they answer a question in a polite way, or they are being positive. I was like, this is anatomy and physiology. Why would you say positive feedback is when someone gives a good reason or they answer a question in a polite way? Then why was negative feedback is when they give you an answer in a rude way? I was like, what? Didn't you learn anything in anatomy and physiology about negative and positive feedback? So let me repeat this. So these terms, positive and negative feedback, we are not talking about answering someone in a positive or negative way. We also don't, we are not meaning something is a bad or a good response. No. What we mean is the type of response the system has to the presence of the effector. So here we use the word effector. So now let's now dive in to what is specifically what is positive feedback. So in positive feedback systems, the effector of a process bolsters the stimulus, which increases the production of the product. That is positive feedback. Okay, when the effector of a process increases or bolsters the stimulus, which then increases the production of the products. That's what we are referring to as positive feedback. Okay, so one common example of a positive feedback system in living things is blood clotting. Okay, so that's one example. So when skin is cut and blood vessels experience damage, platelets in the bloodstream collect at the site of the cut and begin releasing several different chemicals. So the uh, product or effect of the process that signal more platelet recruitment, then more platelets trigger more chemical release, which triggers more platelets, which triggers more chemical signals, and so on, until the platelets and various associated proteins have plugged up the cut with a clot. So here we are saying the effector is actually bolstering the stimulus, and so which in turn increases the production of the product. So the product here are the platelets and the chemical. So and the stimulus was of course the cut. Okay, so then the platelets are now increasing in number, and of course they are again causing an increase in the release of chemicals, and together they are going to make up a clot. That is a positive feedback. Okay, then another example is the process of labor and childbirth in mammals. So the effector is a hormone called oxytocin, which stimulates uterine contractions, which then causes more oxytocin release, hence more contractions. So this continues until the baby is born. So the positive feedback process of labor, in which oxytocin stimulates uterine contraction, that is the positive feedback process we are talking about in labor. So in labor, we talk about oxytocin causing release, causing contractions, and of course the stimulus will continue causing excitation for the release of more oxytocin, which will again lead to a production which will again cause a release of more of uterine contractions until of course the baby is born. So positive feedback systems essentially cause a growing cascade reaction in which each new product further amplifies the very process that created it, ensuring a whole lot more products. Then they are typically not ongoing process in an individual, but rather reactions to specific states of physiological stress, as we see in these two examples which we have given. Okay, so this is the example for the oxytocin. Okay, so the child pushes on the cervix, which is the stimulus, and the signal is sent to the brain. The brain releases oxytocin to stimulate the uterus to contract. As the baby pushes, more oxytocin is released, completing the positive feedback. This continues until the baby is delivered. So it's more of a cycle. It continues to happen until the baby is delivered. Okay, so that's all on positive feedback. Now let's look at the negative feedback. So in negative feedback systems, the effector of a process reduces the effect of the stimulus, which in turn decreases the production of the product. Okay, that's what happens. Then this is more common process in living systems, as it serves to maintain homeostasis of organisms, their optimal internal environment. Then many different key parameters of living things, such as temperature, pH, and hormone levels, for example, must stay within a particular range for those organisms to thrive. So negative feedback systems maintain homeostasis by ensuring that the product of a process does not reach excessive amounts, as the presence of a product will reduce the further stimulus and the production of more product. This is of course going to make sense with the example. Okay, so for example, the human body temperature. The hypothalamus of a human responds to temperature fluctuations and responds accordingly. If the temperature drops, the body shivers to bring up the temperature, and if it is too warm, the body will sweat to cool down due to evaporation. Okay, that's an example of a negative feedback. So another example would be human blood pressure. So when the blood pressure increases, signals are sent to the brain from the blood vessels, which signals and those signals are sent to the heart from the brain, and the heart rate slows down, thus helping blood pressure to return to normal. That's one of the mechanisms. Okay, so another example of a negative feedback is when a human is hungry and metabolisms slow down to conserve energy and allow the human to continue living with less food. Okay, then the other example is the regulation of blood sugar in humans. Also, when blood sugar rises, insulin sends a signal to the liver. Okay, so of course the pancreas has released insulin, then insulin sends a signal to the liver. Okay, and insulin goes and binds to the liver cells, the hepatocytes, and of course can go to the adipocytes, the muscles, and other cells to store the excess glucose. Then some is stored as body fat and the other is stored as glycogen in the liver and the muscles. So that's one way when blood sugar rises. Okay, then of course when it's so low, it still falls under negative feedback. Then the other example would be production of human red blood cells through the process of erythropoiesis. So a decrease in oxygen is detected by the kidneys and they secrete erythropoietin. Then this hormone stimulates the production of the red blood cells. Okay, so that's why I love about anatomy is that if you are learning about anatomy, then you go and learn about the condition then you are going to realize to say you are going to be even understanding more of the condition. For instance, conditions such as carbon monoxide poisoning. That's when you find that if they say a patient with carbon monoxide poisoning will present with an elevated number of red blood cells, or the hemoglobin will actually be, so red blood cells will be high, hemoglobin high. So this is where now it's come from. So remember, there is decrease in oxygen. Okay, so in carbon monoxide poisoning, you find that uh, oxygen is displaced by the carbon monoxide on the oxyhemoglobin compound or complex, and it becomes a carbon monoxide hemoglobin complex or carboxy carbon monoxide complex. So that carbon monoxide complex, the body will detect that there is a decrease in the oxygen which is being carried by the red blood cells, and the kidneys will secrete erythropoietin, and of course there will be a production of red blood cells. You do full blood counts, someone will have an increased uh, red blood cells and hemoglobin as well. So that's why they encourage not to sleep with a brazier at home. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so a real life example is with glucose and insulin. So when we eat a meal then of course there's going to be a large spike in glucose. Then this changes our glucose range beyond the normal level. So to promote cells to use and store glucose, the body releases insulin. This brings the glucose level back to normal. Then on the other side, if the glucose level is too low, the body will release glucagon. And there's a good friend of mine who used to remember glucagon, as in he used to remember how he used to remember glucagon. He used to say glucagon. So as in glucose gone. So when is glucagon released? When glucose is gone. So glucagon. So it was a silly way of remembering, but it was actually very helpful. So glucagon is only released when the glucose levels are low. So glucose gone. Okay. So after the glucose is gone or is too low, in this case, this will promote the release of stored sugars, then which means there will be conversion of glycogen to glucose through the process of glycogenolysis. So this will put low glucose sugar levels back to normal. And this is the opposite feedback loop to insulin, which is also an example of a negative feedback. So this is what we were talking about insulin and the glucose, insulin and glucagon. Okay, glucagon, glucose gone. But remember, when glucose is gone, of course, someone is going to die. So it's just going to help you remember that glucagon is released when glucose is low. Yes. Okay, so what's the difference between positive and negative feedback? So main molecular and physiological processes are controlled by feedback mechanisms. So in a feedback group, the product of a process, such as the breakdown of proteins into amino acids, has an effect on the rate of the process. So negative feedback. Okay, so negative feedback occurs when the rate of the process decreases as the concentration of the product increases. That's the negative feedback. So negative feedback, the process decreases as the concentration of the product increases. Positive for the process increases, concentration of the product also increases. Positive feedback occurs when the rate of the process increases as the concentration of the product increases. Okay, the negative feedback controls the rate of a process to avoid accumulation of a product. Then the rate of a process will continuously accelerate under positive feedback as long as the substrate is available and the product is not consumed by some other process. Okay, those are some of the. Okay, so we have gone through the hormonal control mechanisms. So we may now look at the anatomy and physiology now of the endocrine system, as in the glands now in details. Okay, so the glands in details. So number one, we are starting with the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus, which is part of the nervous system, is a minute region almost the size of an almond, present at the center of the human brain near the pituitary gland. Then in terms of structure, it consists of three main regions: of the anterior region, the middle region, and the posterior region. Then it plays a vital role in the production of hormones. Maintaining the hypothalamus healthy is very important. Its improper functioning causes several disorders. Okay, so that's the hypothalamus. Okay, so I have the anterior lobe, the posterior lobe. Okay, then let's start with the anterior lobe. So the anterior region is also known as the supraoptic region. It regulates body temperature and maintains the circadian rhythm. And there are several small nuclei in the hypothalamus. The major hypothalamic nuclei include the supraoptic and the paraventricular nuclei. Then the nuclei in this region are involved in the hormone secretion. Then following are the hormones secreted by the anterior region of the hypothalamus. You have the corticotropin releasing hormone, thyrotropin releasing hormone, you have the gonadotropin releasing hormone, you have oxytocin, vasopressin, and somatostatin. Okay, so these are some of the hormones that are secreted by the anterior pituitary lobe of the anterior region of the hypothalamus. But remember, we are saying this is more of a control center, so it doesn't necessarily directly release these, doesn't necessarily directly release all of these, no. Okay. Then we have the mid region. So the mid region is also known as the tuberal region. It consists of ventromedial and arcuate nuclei, and the ventromedial nuclei control the appetite, whereas the arcuate nuclei secrete the growth hormone responsible for the growth and development of the body. Then the posterior region, this region is also known as the mammalian region, which is the major nuclei, and where the major nuclei include the posterior hypothalamic nucleus and the mammillary nuclei. Then the posterior hypothalamic nuclei cause shivering and blockage of sweat, and thus reduces the body temperature, or regulates the body temperature, not reduce, regulates the body temperature. The mammillary nuclei, on the contrary, are believed to be involved in the memory function. Okay, so together the functions of the hypothalamus, we know that the hypothalamus contains osmotic sensors that react to the concentration of sodium, potassium, carbon dioxide, chloride. So when the blood pressure is very low, these osmotic sensors and the baroreceptors intimate the kidneys to store or release water to maintain the concentration of these substances. So the following are the important functions of the hypothalamus. So its main function is maintaining the body's internal balance, which is of course the homeostasis. It also connects the endocrine and the nervous system. Then the hypothalamus stimulates or inhibits many of the body's activities in order to maintain homeostasis, such as regulating body temperature, appetite, and the body weight, heart rate, and blood pressure, etc., etc. Then it is also involved in many essential functions of the body, including childbirth, emotions, sleep cycles, balancing in body fluids, appetite and thirst control, blood pressure, and heart rate. Those are things the hypothalamus is involved in. Okay, then the hormones secreted by the hypothalamus. So, the anterior region of the hypothalamus is responsible for hormone secretion. Then the nuclei present in this region lead the process. So the important hormone secreted by the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus triggers the secretion of hormones. So which hormones are triggered by the hypothalamus? So are triggered for the release by the hypothalamus. We have corticotropin releasing hormone, which this hormone is responsible for the regulation of metabolic and immune response. We have thyrotropin releasing hormone, which triggers the pituitary glands to release the thyroid stimulating hormone, which plays a major role in the functioning of organs of the body, such as the heart, muscle, etc., etc. You also have gonadotropin releasing hormone, which stimulates the pituitary gland to release several reproductive hormones, such as follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone. Okay, then also we have oxytocin. So it is involved in several processes such as lactation, childbirth, regulating sleep cycles, maintaining body temperature. Then the other function, of course, is somatostatin. The other hormone is somatostatin. So this hormone is also known as a growth hormone inhibiting hormone. So this growth hormone inhibiting hormone, it regulates the endocrine system and affects the neurotransmission and cell proliferation, by interacting with G protein coupled receptors. Then, since we talked about oxytocin, so what is oxytocin specifically? So oxytocin is a polypeptide hormone released during childbirth and lactation. Then in females, it is mainly involved in stimulating the growth of prostaglandins, increasing the contraction of the muscles of the uterus, reduces the excess blood flow post childbirth, promotes milk movement into the mammary glands, as well as, of course, contraction of the lactiferous ducts as well. Then in males, oxytocin helps in the production of testosterone. It also aids in the movement of sperms. It also plays a role in social behavior, various aspects around it. Then it is also, so the other term for oxytocin is actually love hormone. So that's the other term, love hormone. Okay, so what are the effects of oxytocin? So effects of oxytocin. So consumption of oxytocin can have adverse side effects such as higher levels of oxytocin have been related to benign prostate hyperplasia. Then lack of oxytocin can prevent breastfeeding by milk ejection reflex. Then low oxytocin levels have also been linked to autistic disorders such as Asperger's syndrome. It also leads to depressive symptoms. Then the fetal heart rate deceleration, pulmonary edema, and uterine hyperstimulation are other conditions caused due to oxytocin. Okay, then vomiting, nausea, jaundice, neonatal hypobilirubinemia, sinus bradycardia are also caused due to abnormal oxytocin levels. Then oxytocin imbalance in the body causes seizures in the neuron. Then what are the functions of oxytocin? So we talked about the effects. What are the functions now? So it affects the gland growth. It also acts as the neurotransmitter in the brain. It stimulates the contractility of the epididymis, the prostate gland, and the seminiferous tubules. Then oxytocin plays a role in maternal and sexual behavior, memory-related, yawning, feeding, thermoregulation, and cardiovascular regulation as well. Then it stimulates uterine muscle contractions. So during childbirth, fetal ejection reflex produces oxytocin, which causes contraction of muscles of the uterus. So we are now done with our oxytocin. Let's also look at another hormone, which is ADH, antidiuretic hormone, antidiuretic hormone. So ADH, also known as arginine vasopressin, is the hormone produced by the hypothalamus and stored in the posterior pituitary gland. It is made up of special nerve cells found at the base of the hypothalamus. The hormone is transported to the pituitary gland via axons where it is released into the bloodstream. It regulates balances of amount of water in the blood. Also, what are the functions of the ADH? It acts on the kidneys and the blood vessels and functions to control the blood pressure. Then higher concentration of ADH constricts the blood vessels, which increases the blood pressure. It also allows the water in the urine to be taken back in a specific area in the kidney and thus reduces the amount of water excreted through the urine, whereby conserving the volume of the fluid in the body. So I remember we used to say it causes sodium and water reabsorption. Okay. Then it is mainly responsible for homeostasis. So what about regulation of ADH? So how is it regulated? So the release of ADH into the bloodstream is regulated by a number of factors. Then the decrease in the blood volume or blood pressure is detected by the large blood vessel and the receptors present in the heart, which stimulates the release of ADH. So the increase in the concentration of salts in the bloodstream also controls the secretion of ADH, which is identified by special nerve cells in the hypothalamus. So alcohol prevents the release of ADH, which causes dehydration and increased urination production. Of course, when someone is drunk, you find that they will be uh, urinating every now and then, and they may end up dehydrated. So alcohol prevents the release of ADH. So meaning no sodium and water reabsorption. Okay. So if the levels of ADH are high, the water is retained by the kidneys in the body. Then if excess ADH is released when not required, the blood gets diluted due to excess water retention. The salt concentration in the blood thus decreases. Then higher levels of ADH may be caused due to the side effects of drugs, lung diseases, etc. etc. Then increased ADH is associated with leukemia, lymphoma, bladder cancer, brain cancer, etc. etc. Then if the levels of ADH are lower, a lot of water is excreted by the kidneys. This increases urine volume and lowers blood pressure. Then low levels of ADH indicate primary polydipsia and damage the hypothalamus or pituitary gland. Then diabetes insipidus is related to low levels of ADH. Okay, so low levels of ADH, of course, someone will be having a lot of water sodium and hypertension, and of course there will be dehydration, and there will be an increase in urine production. Okay, let's continue. So what are some of the hypothalamus disorders? So hypothalamic disorders can be due to the following problems. Number one, you can have head injury, genetic disorders, tumors in the hypothalamus. You have disorders in eating, brain surgery, autoimmune diseases. And the symptoms that indicate a hypothalamic disorder may include body temperature fluctuations, infertility, and usually high or low blood pressure. So apart from infertility, then unusually high or low blood pressure. And the other symptom is insomnia. Then of course there will be a change in appetite, change in appetite. And then also there may be frequent urination. And then the other symptom may be delayed puberty. Okay, so finally done with the hypothalamus. Let's go to the pituitary gland or the hypophysis cerebri. So the pituitary gland of the hypophysis cerebri. So the pituitary gland is also known as the hypophysis, and it is a pear-shaped, a pear-sized endocrine gland situated at the base of our brain. Then the pituitary gland is part of the endocrine system and controls the function of several other endocrine glands. It is often referred to as the master gland because it produces some of the important hormones in the body. It is situated in a bony structure called the pituitary fossa, just below the hypothalamus, close to the optic nerve. Then the pituitary gland is divided into three parts, also called the lobes. Of the anterior lobe, the intermediate lobe, but this one is actually absent in adult human beings, and the posterior lobe. So if you forget that there is no intermediate, you may be given the benefit of the doubt, but if you are not supposed to forget the anterior and the posterior lobes, these ones definitely you are not supposed to forget. Okay, so those are the lobes of the pituitary gland. Okay, or the hypophysis. So that's the pituitary gland. So this is the pituitary gland. You have the anterior lobe and the posterior pituitary lobe. Then on top of it, that's where you have the hypothalamus. Okay, then the fully developed pituitary gland is pear-shaped, pear-sized, and weighs approximately 0.5 grams. Then the adenohypophysis constitutes roughly 80% of the pituitary and manufactures an array of peptide hormones. It is connected to the hypothalamus by the pituitary or hypophyseal stalk. Then the release of these pituitary hormones is mediated by the hypothalamic neurohormones that are secreted from the median eminence. So a site where axon terminals emanate from the hypothalamus, and that reach the adenohypophysis via a portovenous. Okay, so now let's start with the lobes now. So specifically, we're starting with the anterior lobe. So the anterior pituitary is the front lobe of the pituitary gland, which is a small, pear-sized gland located at the base of your brain, below the hypothalamus. Then the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland, also known as the adenohypophysis, produces and secretes the majority of pituitary hormones. Its function is controlled by the releasing hormones of the hypothalamus. For instance, we are talking about the hypothalamus initiating or stimulating the anterior lobe. For instance, the hypothalamus might secrete the gonadotropin releasing hormone to stimulate the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland to produce reproductive hormones such as follicle-stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone. Okay, so the anterior lobe consists of thick irregular cords of cells branching by side. Okay, then the anterior pituitary, which is the adenohypophysis, is made up of three distinctive parts. You have the anterior part, which is the distal, the glandular part, which is the part with the strongest secretory activity. It is composed of follicles that vary in size, but essentially contain three types of cells. Then these cells are classified according to their histological staining and include chromophores. So chromophores, we have acidophilic and basophilic, and we also have chromophobes. Then the acidophilic cells further divide into somatotrophs and lactotrophs. So the former produce the growth hormones, while the latter produce prolactin. Okay, so that's what we are talking about here. So the acidophilic, the somatotrophics produce the growth hormones, then the lactotrophies produce prolactin. So prolactin, lactating, lactotrophs. Okay, that's easy. Well, that's one way to remember it. Then the basophilic cells divide into gonadotrophs, producing follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Also corticotrophs such as ACTH. Okay, and the thyrotropes, which is, for instance, another thyrotrope is the thyroid stimulating hormone. Then corticotropes as well. Then you have the chromophobes, which stain weakly, and they are progenitor cells. So and that's the end of the anterior parts. Then you have the tubular part that extends from the anterior part of the pituitary gland. Then the majority of its cells are gonadotrophs, with the small remainder being the thyrotrophs. The tubular part surrounds the infundibulum stem, then a collection of axons that project into the pituitary from the hypothalamus. So these axons are filled with the accumulated hormone such as oxytocin and vasopressin. Then lastly, you have the intermediate part, which is located between the anterior part of the adenohypophysis and the neurohypophysis. It contains follicles that are made up of colloidal matrices. Then the majority of the cells in this part are the corticotropic basophils, with less abundant pituitary pituitary stem cells. These corticotropes cells of this part produce melanocyte stimulating hormone and endorphins. That's about the intermediate part. Okay, then the anterior lobe hormones, we have the anterior lobe secretes 5 different endocrine hormones. okay, and releases them into the bloodstream. So these hormones are, so the hormones which we are talking about from the anterior part, we have the growth hormones, we have prolactin, we have follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. You also have thyrotropic hormone. Then you have the adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is the CTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. Then you have the other, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the 5 hormones it secretes. So growth hormones for bones and muscles. You have prolactin for mammalian glands, then of course there will be lactation. Then you have the follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone for the testes and the ovaries. So in testes, follicle stimulating hormone actually stimulates uh, the production of so for follicle stimulating hormone, it stimulates the production of sperms. Then after production of sperms has started in testes, then its maturation is going to actually be completed by testosterone. Then for luteinizing hormone in males, it stimulates the Leydig cells, the secretory cells of the Leydig to start producing testosterone. Okay, so luteinizing hormone in males stimulates the secretory cells of Leydig to promote to release testosterone. Then in females, luteinizing hormone, there's a surge of luteinizing hormone causes ovulation. Then follicle stimulating hormone, of course, releases will actually promote the secretion of follicle of a follicle. Then of course 15 to 20 follicles are stimulated, and when one become a dominant one, which we call the Graafian follicle. Okay, then you have the other hormone, which is the thyrotropic hormone, which stimulates the thyroid. Okay, so that's the thyroid stimulating hormone, which stimulates the thyroid to produce these thyroid hormones. Then lastly, we have adrenocorticotropic hormone, which stimulates the adrenal cortex. Okay, then the anterior lobe gland produces and releases 6 main hormones. Okay, so we have the adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH or corticotropin. This hormone stimulates your adrenal glands to produce cortisol and the other hormones. Then follicle stimulating hormone stimulates the testes to produce sperms and stimulates the ovaries to produce eggs and the estrogen. Then luteinizing hormone, this hormone stimulates the ovaries and testes to produce hormones. Then thyroid stimulating hormone, this hormone stimulates the thyroid gland to produce thyroid hormone. Then you have prolactin, which stimulates milk production in women. Then you have growth hormones, which stimulates growth and cell reproduction in humans and other. Okay, so then how is the anterior pituitary function regulated? So the hypothalamus is the main regulator of the anterior pituitary function. Then the hypothalamus regulates the activity of the anterior pituitary by releasing its stimulating and or inhibiting hormones that include corticotropin releasing hormone. We have the growth hormone releasing hormone. We also have gonadotropin releasing hormone as well. Okay, then the other hormones, we have thyrotropin releasing hormone. So in short, it is usually regulated by some negative feedback mechanism. Then we also have another hormone, which is dopamine. And the other one is somatostatin, also known as the growth hormone inhibiting hormone. Okay. Okay, so we are done with the anterior lobe. Let's go to the posterior pituitary now. So the posterior portion of the pituitary gland is a specialized neuroendocrine structure. Then unlike the anterior pituitary, it doesn't contain the secretory cells, but rather main and myelinated axons that originate from the secretory hypothalamic neurons, specifically from the magnocellular neurons of the paraventricular and the supraoptic nuclei. Okay. Then the only cellular components of the posterior pituitary are the glial cells called the pituocytes. Okay. Then the neurohypophysis is divided into the following parts. You have the infundibulum, which consists of the main and myelinated axons that form the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tracts. Then these tracts connect the pituitary gland to the hypothalamus and serve to transport the neurohormones from the hypothalamic nuclei to the neurohypophysis. The neural lobe. So we have the pars. So the neural lobe, also known as the pars nervosa or the posterior lobe, is a collection of the approximately 100,000 unmyelinated axons and their endings. So these axon terminals contain the neural secretory bodies, which is the airing bodies, that are filled with granules that contain the hypothalamic hormones, destined to be released by the neurohypophysis. Each granule contains either antidiuretic hormone or oxytocin. So that's the neural lobe and the infundibulum. So the posterior pituitary gland also releases hormone. So you have to note that the posterior portion of the pituitary does not contain glandular tissue, which means that it is not actively producing hormones. Its main function is to store and release two hormones secreted by the hypothalamus, which is ADH and the oxytocin. So oxytocin is a neuropeptide produced by the neurosecretory cells of the supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei. It participates mainly in the process related to reproduction and childbirth, such as uterine contraction and lactation, as well as in human behavior, such as social bonding. Remember, we said oxytocin is also known as the love hormone. Then antidiuretic hormone ADH or arginine vasopressin is mainly produced in the supraoptic and supraventricular regions of the hypothalamus. It is essential in the control of body's electrolyte balance, blood pressure, and kidney function. It's controlled by the releasing hormones of the hypothalamus. Then lastly, you have the intermediate lobe. So the intermediate lobe has an irregular low row of follicles containing pale staining choroid material and clusters. Then we are now done with uh, the pituitary gland. So now let's start with the pineal gland. So it's supposed to be Pineal, pineal gland, or the epiphysis cerebri. So the pineal gland, or the epiphysis cerebri, it is a pine cone-shaped small gland located in the middle of the human brain, in between the two hemispheres in an area called the epithalamus. It was once known as the third eye. It is the major site for melatonin secretion, which regulates the body's internal clock, which is the circadian rhythm. So this gland is rich in calcium levels. The calcium acts as a radiographer to locate the middle of the brain in X-ray images. It was also one of the last glands to be discovered, the pineal gland. Then in terms of anatomy, the pineal gland, it is about 0.3 inches long and weighs 0.1 grams. Then the adrenergic nerves entering the pineal gland regulates its function. Then the pineal gland is composed of pinealocytes and supporting cells that resemble the astrocytes present in the brain. Then some lower vertebrates have a well-deserved eye-like structure that acts as a light. Then hormones secreted by the pineal gland, which is of course melatonin. So the pineal gland synthesizes melatonin and serotonin. Hence, they are also called the pineal gland hormone. So the pineal gland also produces neurosteroids. Then let's now talk about the two hormones. So serotonin is the precursor of melatonin. So serotonin is acetulated and methylated to yield melatonin within the pineal gland. The light exposure to the eyes affects the synthesis and secretion of melatonin. So two melatonin receptors have been found in mammals. You have MEL1A and MEL1B. So these are G protein coupled cell surface receptors. And the melatonin actually affects the circadian rhythm. So our circadian rhythm is a 24 hours biological cycle characterized by the sleep-wake patterns. The daylight and darkness regulate our circadian rhythms. Then the secretion of melatonin is stopped on exposure to light, which in turn controls the circadian rhythm. Then the secretion of melatonin is high during dark and low during the daylight. So this influences our reaction to photoperiod. Then in terms of functions of the pineal gland, number one is secretion of melatonin. So this gland secretes the hormone melatonin, which regulates the circadian rhythm of the body and also certain reproductive hormones. Then the secretion of this hormone depends upon the amount of light a person is exposed to. So this hormone is produced in large amount when it is dark. Then the presence of light inhibits the secretion of the melatonin, which controls our circadian rhythms. Then cardiovascular, the other function is in the cardiovascular health. So the melatonin secretion has a positive impact on the heart and blood pressure. It also be used. It may also be used for the treatment of cardiovascular diseases. Then the other function is reproduction. So melatonin inhibits the secretion of reproductive hormones from the anterior pituitary, which are responsible for the development and functioning of the reproductive organs. Okay, then what are some of the disorders of the pineal gland? So listed below are some of the few disorders caused by malfunctioning of the pineal gland. Number one is depression, two mood swings, three peptic or stomach ulcers, four disruption in sleep patterns, five an impaired pineal gland leads to hormonal imbalance. Then sexual disorders are caused by the dysfunctioning of the pineal glands. And other disorders include we have low melatonin secretion, which also leads to anxiety. You also have a low thyroid hormone production. Then you can also develop menopause symptoms like then other disorders we can have oversecretion of melatonin, which can lead to low blood pressure and improper functioning of the thyroid glands and as well as the adrenal glands. So that's about the pineal gland. Okay, then if a tumor develops in the pineal gland, it affects several other factors in the body. So someone may start experiencing nausea, seizures, headache, memory disruption, impaired vision, and other senses. Okay, so we are now done with the pineal gland. Next is the thyroid gland. So the thyroid gland is the largest endocrine gland in our body. Then the thyroid gland is a ductless endocrine gland situated in the anterior or front portion of the neck. It is yellowish brown in color, highly vascular. It roughly resembles the shape of the butterfly. It is also one of the largest endocrine glands, weighing an average of 25 to 30 grams. This gland has two lobes on each side of the trachea, with each lobe measuring 4 to 6 centimeters in length and 1.3 to 1.8 centimeters in width. So the primary function of the thyroid gland is to secrete two hormones. Namely, we have T3, which in full is known as triiodothyronine hormone, and the other hormone is T4, which is thyroxine hormone, or also known as tetraiodothyronine. Okay. So both T3 and T4 hormones play a very important role and affects almost every tissue in the body. Okay, so this is the thyroid gland. Okay, this is the thyroid gland. Okay, that's where it is, and that's the blood supply there. Okay, that's the thyroid gland. Okay, so in terms of thyroid gland location, the thyroid gland is located in the anterior neck between C5 and T1 vertebra. It consists of two lobes and parathyroid glands, which are present on their posterior surfaces. So we have thyroid hormones. There are two thyroid hormones, T3, T4. So T4 we are saying thyroxine, also known as tetraiodothyronine. Then T3 we are saying triiodothyronine. So T4, which is the thyroxine, is a hormone secreted by the thyroid gland in the bloodstream. It then travels to the organs such as the kidneys, the liver, where it gets converted into its active form, which is the triiodothyronine. So in short, for thyroxine to actually start working in the body, it needs to be converted to its active form, which is the T3 form in short. Then T3, it is the thyroid hormone that affects physiological processes such as growth, development, metabolism, etc., etc. Then the thyroid gland is a butterfly-shaped, vesicular red-brown endocrine gland situated in the midline of the anterior neck. Under normal circumstances, it extends from the level of the fifth cervical vertebra (C5) to the first thoracic vertebra. On average, the gland weighs 15 to 25, again depending on the literature. Others will tell you another measurement. And this is the largest of the endocrine glands. Then the irregular structure is encased in the pretracheal part of the deep cervical fascia. It is made up of central isthmus that connects the right and left lobes of the organ inferiormedially. Then between the ages of 8 months to 15 years, the thyroid gland appears the same in both males and females. However, the gland is slightly heavier in females over the age of 15 than in males counterparts of similar age. Okay, so this is how it looks like. Okay, we have the hypothalamus, the isthmus, the left lobe, the right lobe. That's how it looks like. So parts. So there are two lobes. Each lobe is roughly conical in shape, with each apex pointing laterally, and their bases inferiormedially between the fourth and the fifth tracheal rings. At the widest point, each lobe measures about 3 centimeters in the transverse plane and 2 centimeters in the anterior-posterior dimension. Then the lobes are roughly 5 centimeters long. The isthmus lies above the second or third tracheal cartridges and measures 1.5 centimeters in both the transverse and cortical planes. Then in some individuals, there may be a third lobe of the thyroid gland known as the pyramidal lobe, which is of course found on top here. Okay, that's the third one, the pyramidal lobe. Then it is also a conical structure that extends from the isthmus up to the hyoid bone. And in some cases, it may also arise from the inferior medial aspect or with the left or right lobes, but it is more commonly seen arising from the left lobe. Okay, then in terms of anatomy, structural anatomy, the membrane of capsules. So the thyroid has a true fibrous capsule formed by the connective tissue fibers. The first capsule is formed by the pretracheal deep cervical fascia, which splits to enclose the gland. Then in terms of relations, the thyroid gland is closely associated with numerous other structures in the anterior neck. So anteriorly, the thyroid gland has a relation with the infrahyoidal muscle, namely the sternothyroid. So then the superior belly of the homohyoid and the sternohyoid as well. Then on the lateral relations, we have the carotid sheath containing the carotid artery and the internal jugular vein, and the vagus vein, and the vagus nerve. Then medially, you have organs such as the larynx, pharynx, trachea, esophagus. Then the nerves, you have the external laryngeal and the recurrent laryngeal nerves. So this is the relations in terms of the structures. Okay. Then in terms of blood supply, the vasculature. So the thyroid gland secretes hormones directly into the secretion and is highly vascularized. Arterial supply. So the arterial supply to the thyroid gland is via two main arteries. We have the superior thyroid artery, which arises as the first branch of the external carotid artery. It lies in close proximity to the external branch of the superior laryngeal nerve, which innervates the larynx. Then the other artery is the inferior thyroid artery, which arises from the thyrocervical trunk, which is a branch of the supraclavicular artery. It lies in close proximity to the recurrent laryngeal nerve. It innervates the larynx. Then in another small portion of people, around 10%, there is an additional artery present, which we call the thyroid artery, which arises from the brachiocephalic trunk and supplies the anterior surface and the isthmus of the thyroid gland. That's the arterial supply. Then in terms of venous drainage, the venous drainage is carried by the superior, middle, and inferior thyroid veins, which form a venous plexus around the thyroid gland. Then the superior and the middle vein drains into the internal jugular vein, and the inferior empties into the brachiocephalic vein. And then you have the lymphatic drainage. The lymphatic drainage of the thyroid is to the paratracheal and deep cervical nodes. So this is about vasculature as well as the lymphatic drainage. So this is what we are talking about. So this is the pyramidal lobe. They are a small portion of people actually have this. Then of the isthmus, of the left lobe, the right lobe. The arteries of the superior thyroid artery and superior thyroid vein, of the inferior thyroid artery, of the middle thyroid vein, of the inferior thyroid vein. Okay. Then in terms of functions of the thyroid gland, so the functions actually are tailored to the hormones. So we can't talk about the functions without mentioning the hormones. So the distinct three hormones we talk about are triiodothyronine, thyroxine, and calcitonin. Okay, so that's why I usually ask this matching question I usually like to ask, where I've put thyroid gland, but they have removed the T3, I've removed the T3 and T4. There's only calcitonin. So you also need to remember to say calcitonin is one of the hormones secreted by thyroid hormone, by thyroid gland. So the thyroid hormones are thyroxine and triiodothyronine. So these consist of two iodine containing hormones, T3 and T4. So thyroxine is also known as T4 as it contains 4 atoms of iodine, whereas triiodothyronine is also called T3 as it contains 3 atoms of iodine. Then the follicular cells of the thyroid produce thyroxine as the major hormone, which is then converted to T3. So both thyroxine and triiodothyronine are composed of two tyrosine amino acid units linked together with iodine atoms. So the number of iodine atoms differ between the two hormones. So we have the primary function or role of thyroid hormone is to increase the basal metabolic rate, which is the BMR. Apart from that, it also increases the heat production via glucose oxidation. Then besides, it is also necessary for tissue growth and development, especially in the case of skeletal and nerve tissues. Then the level of the thyroid hormone in the blood is regulated by the pituitary gland by the release of the thyroid stimulating hormone. Then the regulation and control of the release of the thyroid hormone works by the negative feedback mechanism. Okay, then what about calcitonin? So calcitonin is secreted by the parafollicular cells of the C cells of the thyroid gland as a response to an increased levels of calcium in the blood. However, the hormone is not given as much importance as increased levels of calcium in the blood doesn't have a physiological effect on the body. So calcitonin is given to patients suffering from osteoporosis as it has a bone sparing effect. Calcitonin acts on bones where it inhibits osteoclastic activity, decreasing the release of calcium into the blood. It also stimulates the uptake of calcium from the blood into the bony matrix. That's about calcitonin. So in terms of functions, we are going to use the same hormones once again. So the following are some of the functions of the thyroid gland. The most important function of the thyroid gland is to produce thyroid hormones that are essential for metabolic activities and the growth. Then the thyroid hormone regulates the basal metabolic rate in the body by influencing glucose, fat, and protein metabolism. Then the hormones are composed of iodine atoms that these also play an essential role in iodine metabolism in the body. Then calcitonin produced by the C cells of the thyroid gland regulates the levels of calcium in the blood. So the thyroid hormone plays a crucial role in for growth and development of the target organs in the body, like the brain and the kidneys. So in terms of clinical application or diseases that are associated with the thyroid gland, so the disorders and diseases of the thyroid gland are usually due to hypersecretion or hyposecretion of the hormones. So the following are some of the disorders associated with the thyroid gland and these secretions. Number one, we have what we call Graves' disease. So Graves' disease or Graves' thyroiditis is a condition caused due to hypersecretion of the thyroid hormone. This condition is more common in women than in men and can occur at any age, but is common among individuals between 30 to 50 years. Then Graves' disease is an autoimmune condition in which the abnormal antibodies of the body are directed against the thyroid follicular cells. Then these unusual antibodies mimic the thyroid stimulating hormone of the pituitary gland and stimulate the thyroid gland to produce the hormone. Okay, so here under the same Graves' disease, we are saying there are some what we call antibodies of the body, but these ones are directed at the thyroid follicular cells. And these unusual antibodies are going to mimic the thyroid stimulating hormone of the pituitary gland, and it's going to cause the thyroid gland to produce hormones. Then some of the common symptoms associated with this condition are nervousness, elevated metabolism, sweating, weight loss, etc. etc. But from Graves' disease, we also have a simple goiter. So a simple goiter is a condition caused by hyposecretion of the thyroid hormones as a result of enlargement of the gland. So the goiter is characterized by the formation of extrathyroid tissue, which causes the enlargement of the gland. It is caused due to persistent iodine deficiency, which causes a relative lack of T3 and T4 in the body. Then in some cases, the increased size of the gland can cause damage to the adjacent tissues like the esophagus and the nerves. Then the other condition, we can have cretinism, which is due to the hyposecretion of the thyroid hormones in children. Then in terms of clinical features of this condition, these ones are observed in the form of mental retardation and a disproportionately sized body. Then the effect of the condition depends on the age and physiological activity of the individual, but it is usually more severe in children than in adults. Then cretinism might be caused due to genetic deficiency of the thyroid gland or maternal factors like the lack of. Then apart from that, we can also have thyroid tumors, where we have the malignant tumors of the thyroid gland, which are rare, but benign tumors, including single adenomas, are fairly common. However, in the case of older adults, the tumor might become malignant. Then even with benign tumors, some might produce a large amount of hormones, resulting in hyperthyroidism. So now, next thing is hyperthyroidism. So what is this? So hyperthyroidism is a condition where thyroid glands excessively produce a hormone called thyroxine. Then the symptoms include a change in appetite, unexpected weight loss, insomnia, fatigue, irritability, frequent urination, increased sweating, and heat intolerance. But this condition usually resolves within a few months of relevant treatment and proper medication. Then the other condition is hypothyroidism. This condition is caused by the undersecretion of the thyroid hormones. It is a very common problem and often stays undetected for years. And one of the main reasons that triggers hypothyroidism is an autoimmune disorder called Hashimoto's disease. In this condition, the antibodies produced by the bodies attack the thyroid gland, and this results in the gland producing fewer hormones. Okay, then we are done with the thyroid gland now. So this is confusing with the thyroid gland, but this is also another gland now. Okay, it is found below the thyroid gland, so we call it the parathyroid gland. So okay, so the parathyroid gland are small endocrine glands situated just below the thyroid glands in the anterior neck. They are usually 4 in number, 2 behind each thyroid gland. They are very small, pear-sized, and weigh about 50 milligrams, and they are responsible for the production of the parathyroid hormone. I think of all the matching questions, the easiest matching question is the parathyroid gland. It produces parathyroid hormone. Like the leakage is right there in the word parathyroid hormone, parathyroid gland, or the other word for parathyroid hormone is parathyrin. Okay, so that's the other word. Okay, so parathyrin hormone which acts to increase the levels of serum calcium. Then the gland function to maintain the calcium and phosphorus levels in our body. Then until the 20th century, scientists failed to recognize the glands separate from the thyroid glands. Because of the small size of the parathyroid glands, now the two glands can be differentiated easily, as the thyroid glands have a follicular structure and the cells of the parathyroid glands are densely packed. That's the parathyroid. In terms of its anatomical location, the parathyroid glands are usually located on the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland. They are flattened and oval in shape, situated external to the thyroid gland itself, but within the pretracheal fascia. Then most individuals have 4 parathyroid glands, although variation in number from 2 to 6 is actually common. Then you have the superior parathyroid glands, which are of course 2, which are derived from the 4th pharyngeal pouch. They are located at the middle of the posterior border of each thyroid lobe, then approximately 1 cm superior to the entry of the inferior thyroid artery into the thyroid gland. Then you have also another 2 inferior parathyroid glands, which are derived from the 3rd pharyngeal pouch. Although inconsistent in location between individuals, the inferior parathyroid glands are usually found near the inferior pores of the thyroid gland. Then in a small number of people, the inferior parathyroid glands can be found as far as inferiorly as the superior mediastinum. That's the parathyroid of the superior parathyroid, the inferior parathyroid gland. In terms of vasculature of the parathyroid gland, the vascular supply is similar to that of the thyroid gland. Arterial supply is chiefly via the inferior thyroid artery, as this artery supplies the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland, where the parathyroids are located. Then collateral artery supply is from the superior thyroid artery and thyroid artery. Then venous drainage is into the superior, middle, and inferior thyroid veins. Then in terms of lymphatics, the lymphatic drainage from the parathyroid gland is to the paratracheal and deep cervical nodes. Then in terms of nerves, the parathyroid glands have an extensive supply of sympathetic nerves derived from the thyroid branches of the cervical ganglia. You also have to note that these nerves are vasomotor, non-secretomotor. Then the endocrine secretion of the parathyroid hormone is under hormonal control. Okay, so what are the functions of the parathyroid hormone? So the parathyroid gland releases the parathyroid hormone, which is also known as parathormone or parathyrin. So in the matching question, if you see parathyrin or parathormone, you are talking about the parathyroid hormone in short. It is a small peptide that maintains the homeostasis of calcium and phosphate. It also aids in bone physiology, and let us see how this hormone acted functions. Number one, calcium. So the parathyroid hormone functions to release calcium from the bones by stimulating the osteoblasts. It facilitates gastrointestinal calcium absorption by activating vitamin D. It also promotes calcium reabsorption in the kidneys. The normal calcium levels in the body support strong nervous and muscular systems. Okay, then the other function is in terms of phosphorus. So in terms of phosphorus, it inhibits the absorption of phosphorus in the kidneys. However, the hormone increases the absorption of phosphorus in the gastrointestinal tract by activating vitamin D. Then the other function is activation of vitamin D. So the parathyroid hormone also helps in the activation of vitamin D by upregulating the enzyme 1-alpha hydrolase. So if you ask what are the functions of vitamin D in bone healing, it promotes the uptake or reuptake or absorption of calcium and phosphorus by the bones. Then in terms of disorders of parathyroid gland, we have hyperparathyroidism. So this condition is developed when an individual produces too much of the parathyroid hormone. For production of the hormone releases large amounts of calcium, which causes hypercalcemia. Then the symptoms include extreme thirst, more urine production, abdominal pain, and mood changes. Then undetected high levels of calcium lead to bone thinning or osteoporosis and can also cause stones in the kidneys. Then the other disorder is hypoparathyroidism, where we have low levels of parathyroid hormone, which causes hypoparathyroidism and hypocalcemia. Then the symptoms include tingling sensation, muscle cramps, and the spasms as well. Okay, so we are done with the parathyroid gland. Let's now look at the adrenal gland. So the adrenal or the suprarenal gland are paired endocrine glands situated over the middle aspect of the upper pores of each kidney. Then the name adrenal directly refers to their location. So in Latin, ad means near, then renes means kidneys. So in short, near the kidneys. So they secrete steroid and catecholamine hormones directly into the blood. Then in terms of anatomical location and relations, the adrenal glands are located in the posterior abdomen between the supramedial kidney and the diaphragm. They are retroperitoneal with the paratoperitoneum covering their anterior surface only. Then the right gland is pyramidal in shape, contrasting with the semilunar shape of the left gland. Of course, the difference in size, of course, is due to the liver. Okay, due to the liver. So on the right, that's where the liver is, and it's going to compress on the right one, which will take up the shape of the pyramid. Whilst the left one will be semilunar shape. Then you have the perinephric or the renal fascia, encloses the adrenal glands and the kidneys. This fascia attaches the glands to the crura of the diaphragm. They are separated from the kidneys by the perineal fat. Then the adrenal glands sit in close proximity to many other structures in the these are the adrenal glands on top of the kidneys. That's what we are talking about. Okay, we have seen adrenal gland here, adrenal gland here. Okay, then in terms of the shape, we say the right one is pyramid, then this one is semi-lunar. Then on the anterior side of the right adrenal gland sits the inferior vena cava and the right lobe of the liver. The posterior side is flanked by the right crus of the diaphragm. Then the stomach, the pancreas, and the spleen sit on the anterior side of the left adrenal gland. Then the posterior side is flanked by the left crus of the diaphragm. Then, as stated in the introduction area where we mentioned where it's located and whatnot, the human body has two adrenal glands. The right gland is pyramidal in shape and the left gland is semilunar in shape. That's what we mentioned. Then the left adrenal gland is actually comparatively larger than the right. So remember, something has been compressed, so of course the one which is not compressed will be larger. So the glands are usually 5 by 3 centimeters in size, and their combined weight ranges from 7 to 10 grams. Health glands are yellowish in. Okay, then there are 3 distinct layers of the adrenal glands. You have the adrenal capsule. So this adrenal capsule is a protective layer of fat that surrounds each adrenal gland, and they are not strictly a part of the adrenal glands themselves. But the primary function of the capsule layer is to enclose and protect each of the adrenal glands. That's why in anatomy, don't just put capsule anywhere, because capsules are a lot. We have the adrenal capsule, the renal capsule. So that's why we're supposed to follow this. If we say adrenal capsule, adrenal cortex, adrenal medulla, follow this. Okay, so let's continue. So the other layer which we have is the adrenal cortex. So the adrenal cortex is the outermost layer of the adrenal gland, which is devoted to the production of aldosterone, cortisol, androgens as well. Then there are 3 layers of cortex called zones, which can be examined and easily differentiated under a microscope. So the adrenal cortex in short has 3 layers, but the 3 layers we refer to them as zones. Which are those zones? But we refer to the term zona. Okay, so that the first adrenal cortex, we have what we call the adrenal cortex. Okay, the first zone we call it the zona glomerulosa. So the zona glomerulosa secretes mineralocorticoids such as the aldosterone. Then you have the zona fasciculata, which is responsible for producing corticosteroids like cortisol. Also secretes small quantities of androgens such as testosterone and androstenedione. So the zona fasciculata, so specifically these ones, the corticosteroids such as cortisol, are also known as glucocorticoids. Okay, and the easiest way, though it's hard to remember. So remember, zona glomerulosa begins with a G. So initially, it would make sense if zona glomerulosa produces glucocorticoids, but it doesn't. So it's the opposite. What produces glucocorticoids is the zona fasciculata. So when you write glomerulosa, remember glucocorticoids and say, no, it's the opposite. So that when you write fasciculata, you'll be able to say, okay, fasciculata is the one produces glucocorticoids such as corticosteroids, for instance, cortisol. Okay, and apart from glucocorticoids such as cortisol, we also produce small quantities of androgens. Okay, that's all. Then the last layer is zona reticularis. This one produces also androgens, mainly androgens. It produces the androgen GHES, which is dehydroepiandrosterone. also called androstenedione. Okay, dehydroepiandrosterone. Dehydroepiandrosterone. Then lastly, you have the last layer, which is last layer of the adrenal gland, which is the adrenal medulla. So the last and the innermost part of the adrenal gland is the medulla, which is the adrenal medulla. It contains the chromaffin cells, which produce the body's main source of catecholamines, such as adrenaline and adrenaline and endorphins. These are stored and released in response to stress. The other name for adrenaline is epinephrine. Then the other name for adrenaline is norepinephrine. So that's it. Then in terms of adrenal gland function, one of the most well-known responses, which is the fight or flight hormone or fight or flight response, is triggered by the release of stress hormones from the adrenal glands. Then the adrenal glands produce a variety of hormones. These hormones are very crucial for the normal functioning of the body. For instance, the glands secrete cortisol, which has an anti-inflammatory properties, and it aids the immune system. Then the adrenal gland also helps to regulate metabolism and blood pressure through various hormones. Then adrenal gland hormones, we have epinephrine, which is also known as adrenaline. This hormone rapidly responds to stress by increasing the heart rate and raising blood sugar levels in the blood. Then the other function is in relation to norepinephrine, which is also known as noradrenaline. So this hormone works with epinephrine in reacting to stress. Its primary function is to immobilize the body and brain for action. Then we have now the glucocorticoids. So an example, you have hydrocortisone. Hydrocortisone, it is commonly known as cortisol, but the actual hydrocortisone is the synthetic cortisol. But the actual cortisol is of course produced by the body, which is a steroid hormone, and it is involved in regulating body functions like the conversion of fats and carbohydrates to energy, and also plays a vital role in other metabolic processes. In other ones, we have corticosterone. So this hormone works with hydrocortisone to control the immune system, immune response, and prevents inflammatory reactions. So what are the disorders of the adrenal glands? Disorders of the adrenal glands, which may appear when not enough hormones or inadequate hormones are produced by the adrenal glands. So even abnormal growth or tumors can cause certain illnesses. So we have Cushing's syndrome, which is a condition where the cortisol levels in the body are very high. Then the cause can be a tumor in the adrenal glands or the pituitary gland. Then the other condition could be adrenocortical carcinoma, which is a cancerous tumor that usually develops in the outer layer of the adrenal gland. Then this type of tumor is typically found years after they have spread to other organs in the body. Then you also have congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which is a genetic disorder characterized by very low levels of cortisol production. Then the people inflicted with this condition may also have other hormonal imbalances where their bodies may make very little aldosterone but too much androgen. Then the last condition is Addison's disease, which is caused when adrenal glands produce insufficient cortisol or aldosterone. It results in weakness, fatigue, and low blood pressure, nausea, etc. in 70% of the cases. Then we have Addison's disease, which is caused due to autoimmune disorder, where the body mistakenly attacks the adrenal glands. As a result, the adrenal glands do not produce the hormone aldosterone in sufficient quantities. So those are some of the conditions. Okay, so we are done with the adrenal gland. Let's look at the thymus gland. Okay, so the thymus gland is one of the key organs in the lymphatic system, which occurs in the mediastinum below the sternum. Then the thymus extends from the lower edge of the thyroid gland to the fourth intercostal space of the vertebra. So the thymus gland is distinct from other endocrine glands in that it is active only before puberty. The gland grows the largest at puberty, after which the gland is slowly replaced by adipose tissue. Then the thymus gland is a critical organ of the immune system as it serves as a defense mechanism against different pathogens, tumors, and antigens. So the thymus is particularly important for the thymus-dependent or adaptive arm of the immune system, as the thymus is essential for the development and activation of the immune system, of the immune cells. So the term thymus is taken from the Greek literature, where it means soul, to indicate that the soul resides in the thymus. In addition to the secretory cells of the thymus, it also contains other immune cells like macrophages, neutrophils, and dendritic cells. Then the proliferation of the secretory cells and the regulation of their secretions is maintained by cytokines like the tumor necrotic factor, TNF, and the interferons. Then the structure and function of the gland can be influenced by autoimmune disease like myasthenia gravis. So in terms of structure of the thymus, it is of course a bilobed gland consisting of two pyramid-shaped lobes, each with a lobulated surface differentiated into the outer cortex and inner medulla. Then each lobe of the gland is surrounded by a dense capsule of connective tissue and divided internally by a connective tissue septum. Then most of the mass in the gland is occupied by a three-dimensional network of star-shaped reticular cells. Then the epithelial cells of the thymus gland are divided into four distinct subtypes depending on the different factors like antigenic expression, outer structure, and their capacity to produce thymic hormones. The subtypes are subcapsular cortical, inner cortical, medullary, and Assos capsules. The outer cortex of the gland contains loosely packed lymphocytes, and the medulla contains the reticulocytes rich in the cytoplasm. But again, remember, don't confuse the cortex, the medulla with the adrenal glands, even the renal system as well, because they find that the renal also has the renal cortex, the renal medulla. But don't confuse these ones. We are talking about the thymus. Okay, so the structure also contains small bodies called Households concentric capsules or households bodies or thymic capsules, which are concentric arrays of squamous cells. Then the size of the thymus is large in infants and young children, with the largest size at puberty. Then the gland then slowly begins to coalesce after puberty to be replaced by adipose tissue. Then the blood supply to the thymus gland is provided by the inferior thyroid, internal thyroid, and the intercostal arteries. Then the gland is attached to the sternum by the sternioid and the sternothyroid muscles, both of which are bilateral. Okay, so what are the hormones of the thymus gland? So the thymus gland produces three distinct hormones. You have thymosin, thymopoietin, and the serum thymic factor. So the thymic hormones do not act on the T cells identically. Their mode of action at the cellular level is based on the binding of the hormones to the specific cell receptors and interaction of the adenyl cyclase. So number one, let's talk about the thymosin. So the thymosin is produced by the epithelial cells of the cortex and medulla, and it is the primary hormone secreted by the gland. Then the most important function of the thymosin is to induce T cell differentiation and enhance the immunological function of different immune cells. Then thymosin has also been associated with increasingly is with increasing the phenotypic markers in lymphocytes. Then thymosin is a protein that is eat stable up to 8 degrees temperature and might contain a small amount of carbohydrates. So in short, what we are saying here is that thymosin actually induces the T cell differentiation. Okay, so for the T cell to differentiate into there are specific type of cells or there are different type of cells, thymosin is one which is responsible. Then thymopoietin just induces the production of T cells, activation of T cells alone. Okay, and some differentiation as well. But the main differentiation is caused by thymosin. Then so thymopoietin is a polypeptide hormone of the thymus that has neuromuscular function than immunological ones. However, the increased levels of hormone are known to induce T cell activation and differentiation as well. So in terms of functions, actually the function again we just refer to the functions, we also refer to the hormones we are talking about. The most important function of the thymus gland is to induce the development, activation, and differentiation of T cells so that they can perform their function as mediators of cellular immunity. Then you have thymic hormones such as thymosin, thymopoietin, which stimulates the prothymocytes to become thymocytes and T lymphocytes. The gland also induces the release of cytokines that are essential for controlling the development of T cells through different stages. Then the thymus is a part of a fetal immunity by the 12th week of pregnancy and remains active through fetal life as well as childhood. As an endocrine gland, the thymus is known to produce human growth hormone, which is essential for the growth and development of the body. So these are the functions, and if you can see, the functions are also actually similar to the hormones they produce. So if you are to forget the function, at least remember the hormone and the function of that hormone, then you are right. Okay, then in terms of disease of the thymus gland, we have this what we call thymic cysts, which are where we have congenital thymic cysts, which might be present within the thymus gland, resulting in the inhibition of proliferation of the thymocytes. Then these cysts can be removed and are usually benign. Then the individual with the thymic cysts show symptoms like cough and upper respiratory tract infections as the immune system of the individual is affected. Then secondary, we can have involution, where thymic involution is common in infants and are exposed to malnutrition, neglect, and abuse. Besides, it can also occur after chemotherapy, radiation, steroid therapy, as the thymus is sensitive to stress. Then involution of the thymus is much rare in neonates, infants of early childhood. Then premature involution can also be taken as a symptom of social problems like abuse. Then the other disease is hypoplasia. So hypoplasia is the decreased number of cells in an organ. So usually during neonatal conditions. So hypoplasia of the thymus occurs due to the development defect of the third and fourth pharyngeal pouches. It has been assumed that alcohol or organic acids tend to injure the neural crests that disturb the differentiation of the pharyngeal pouch. Then the clinical manifestation of the condition depends on the extent of hypoplasia and the amount of genetic material defected. So finally, we are done with the thymus gland. Let's now talk about the pancreas. The pancreas is a complex organ consisting of both exocrine and endocrine areas, where the endocrine part is composed of discrete islets of Langerhans that secrete numerous hormones. The studies related to the islets of Langerhans have increased over the years due to the involvement of the cells in diabetes. The islets, composed of a few thousand endocrine cells, account for about 2% of the total pancreatic mass. Then the primary function of the endocrine region of the pancreas is to assist digestion by the release of hormones that help in the metabolism of different biomolecules. Then the pancreas is located behind the stomach as a soft tadpole-shaped organ. It has been believed that the pancreas developed as an out-pocketing of the epithelial lining of the gastrointestinal tract. Okay, then insulin and glucagon are two most of the important hormones secreted by the cells of the islets of Langerhans. Then the endocrine region, however, secretes at least three other hormones. So the endocrine region of the pancreas begins to form about 10 weeks of pregnancy by the multiplication and differentiation of a single immature epithelial duct. Then the cellular composition of cells, the cellular composition and size of the cells in the iris of Langerhans depend mainly on the species. You have the pancreas and you have the iris of Langerhans here. Then let's now talk about the structure of the pancreas in details. So the proportion of the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas is usually about 2%, with a total number of islets of Langerhans ranging from 3.2 to 14.8 million. Then the cellular composition of the islets of Langerhans differ in different species, and it has been studied that there are functional differences in islets of different species as well. For instance, the islet of Langerhans in humans consists of 4 different types of cells. You have what we call the alpha cells, the beta cells, the delta cells, and the gamma cells, or the pancreatic polypeptide producing cells. So these 4 different types of cells of the iris are arranged randomly through the gland. Then the size of the iris in the pancreas indicate variation as most iris follow the mantle core pattern. Then the beta cells of the pancreas account for 60% of the total iris mass, followed by the alpha cells that occupy 30% of the mass. Then the remaining 10% is covered by the delta and the pancreatic polypeptide producing cells. Then the blood and the nerve supply to the gland is facilitated by a neuromuscular bundle that penetrates the central core of the beta cells. Then the 4 different cells of the iris secrete 4 hormones that influence the metabolism of the body. So this is what we're talking about. We have the 4 cells of the pancreas. We have the alpha cells which secrete glucagon. We have the beta cells which secrete insulin. You also have the F cells which secretes pancreatic polypeptides. Then you have the delta cells which secretes somatostatin. So then let's now look at the hormones. So the hormones now, so those same hormones which are produced by those 4 cells. So the 4 different types of cells found in the pancreas act as secrete 4 different hormones: insulin, glucagon, somatostatin, and pancreatic polypeptide. So first things first, insulin. So insulin is secreted by the beta cells of the iris of Langerhans as a polypeptide consisting of about 50 amino acids. The primary function of insulin is to lower the blood nutrient level, mostly of glucose, but it might include amino acids and fat acids as well. Then the effect of insulin is defined as anabolic, as it tends to facilitate the storage of nutrients in the body. Then insulin is synthesized as a part of a larger polypeptide unit called the proinsulin, which then undergoes crippling to release the insulin. Then insulin works by one of the 3 mechanisms. 1, it enhances the transport of glucose into different cells of the body. 2, it also inhibits the breakdown of glycogen into glucose. Then 3, it also inhibits the interconversion of amino acids or fats into glucose. That's the function of insulin. Okay, so that's the function of insulin. Then the other hormone is glucagon. So glucagon is secreted by the alpha cells of the pancreas, which works by the opposite mechanism of insulin. So glucagon is a polypeptide consisting of 29 amino acids linked together to form a longer polypeptide. Then glucagon is an extremely potent hyperglycemic agent that causes the release of glucose into the blood. Then the target organ of the glucagon hormone is the liver, where it promotes the breakdown of glycogen into glucose. So as it increases the blood glucose level, the hormone also activates the synthesis of glucose from lactic acid and non-carbohydrate molecules. Then the increase in blood glucose levels results in secondary effects of decreased amino acid levels in the blood. Then the release of glucagon by the alpha cells is stimulated by falling blood glucose levels via sympathetic nervous system stimulation as well as rising amino acid levels. So this is about. So in terms of function of the pancreas, actually we also just look at the hormones it produces. So the endocrine part of the gland releases different hormones that work to maintain the blood nutrient level in the body. So insulin is secreted by the alpha cells of the islets of Langerhans that is responsible for decreasing the blood glucose levels in humans. Then pancreas also secretes glucagon, which works to increase the blood glucose levels if the levels go down beyond the normal. Then you have the delta cells of the islets of Langerhans, which releases the somatostatin hormone, which inhibits the secretion of both insulin and glucagon, while inhibiting the secretion of growth hormone by the pituitary gland. Then, in terms of disorders of the pancreas, so the disorders of the pancreas, we can have one which we call diabetes mellitus or diabetes mellitus, which is a condition resulting from either the hyposecretion or hyperactivity of insulin. So diabetes mellitus is of two types. We have type 1 diabetes mellitus, which is out from the hyposecretion of insulin, whereas type 2 diabetes mellitus is out from hypoactivity of released insulin. So the lack of insulin in the body results in increased blood glucose levels, which then causes excess loss of glucose via urine. Then type 1 diabetes mellitus is common among children and is characterized by the immediate onset of symptoms. Then type 2 diabetes mellitus in turn occurs more common in adults and often results in late onset symptoms. Then diabetes mellitus can be life-threatening in some conditions, resulting in kidney failure and other serious conditions. Then in most cases, however, the condition is chronic and doesn't result in death. Of course, there need to be proper treatment. So the treatment of diabetes mellitus is performed in the form of insulin shots, which can help maintain the levels of insulin in the body, especially if you're talking about the type 1 diabetes. Because for type 2, we find that of course, there will be medications to give people. Okay, then we are done with the pancreas. Then the other type of cells are the gonads. So the gonads, number one, are going to start with the testes. So the testes secrete various hormones that are involved in male reproduction and development. So the testes secrete several male sex hormones, which are collectively called androgens, including testosterone and dihydrotestosterone and androstenedione. Testosterone is much more abundant and potent than the others. Then testosterone is formed by the interstitial cells of Leydig, which lie in the interstices between the seminiferous tubules. Then testosterone plays multiple important roles in the body, such as development of the penis and testes, deepening of the voice during puberty, appearance of facial and pubic hair, starting at puberty. Then later in life, it may play a role in bonding. Then you have muscle size and strength, you have bone growth and strength, sex drive, which is of course libido, and of course sperm production. Specifically, testosterone is one which helps the sperms mature. Okay, so after sperm production, then testosterone is one which gives the final touches of sperm production and the maturation. Then the other gonads are the ovaries. So the ovaries, the main function of the ovaries is maturation and release of oocytes, which is accompanied by the production of several steroidal and non-steroidal hormones. So the ovary contains multiple distinct steroid producing cells, including the stromal cells, the thicker cells, granulosa cells, and luteinized granulosa cells. Then each cell type contains all the enzymes necessary for synthesis of androgens, estrogens, and progesterone. And estrogens are essential in the development and maintenance of the female phenotype, then germ cell maturation and pregnancy. In addition to their reproductive effects, estrogens also have many other non-reproductive systemic effects, such as bone metabolism or remodeling, nervous system maturation, and endothelial responsiveness. Then progesterone plays a critical role in reproduction. It inhibits further endometrial proliferation mediated by estrogen and converts the endometrium into a secretory type, preparing it not only to receive the blastocysts for implantation, but also to maintain the pregnancy. It also inhibits the uterine contractions and increases the viscosity of the cervical mucus. Then progesterone also inhibits the action of prolactin so that lactation occurs only after delivery. Okay, then in women, androgens originate as 19-carbon steroids from the adrenal glands, from the adrenals and the ovaries. Then the major androgens produced in the ovaries primarily by the thicker cells. However, these biologically inactive androgens are converted by the extraglandular metabolism to biologically active androgens such as testosterone and dihydrotestosterone, DHT. Okay, so that's about the ovarian hormones. So these are the gonads, the gonads. So in males, the gonads are the testes, in females, the gonads are the ovaries. Then the other thing which we also need to know about is actually the placenta, which is also part of the endocrine system. So next we will talk about the placenta in general in short. Okay, so the placenta refers to the temporary vesicular organ found in mammals which attaches the fetus to the uterus of the mother during pregnancy. Then this is a vesicular structure that develops in the uterus of mammalian females and acts as the organ of attachment between the embryo and the uterine wall, which is called, of course, the placenta. Then in appearance, the placenta is disc-shaped and it measures up to 22 centimeters in length. Then the placenta is also rich in blood vessels. Okay, so the placenta actually is, again has two sides. We have the maternal surface and the fetal surface. Okay, that's about the placenta. Okay, and then in terms of function of the placenta, it provides nourishment to the developing fetus. It transports oxygen, water, and hormone from the mother to the developing fetus. It then removes waste products from the blood of fetus. It also provides protection to the fetus from microorganisms as they cannot pass through the placenta. It also produces hormones which are necessary to maintain pregnancy, such as estrogen, progesterone, and relaxin. So for instance, progesterone is actually produced by the placenta after 4 months, because usually before 4 months the placenta releases progesterone which is not sufficient to maintain pregnancy. But otherwise, that's one of the functions of the placenta, to produce progesterone, which is the pregnancy of which is the hormone of pregnancy. Okay, that's about placenta. Then the other thing which we didn't talk about the placenta is that in terms of structures, the placenta has of course has one vein and has two arteries. That's actually a very good question to ask. after the vasculature of the placenta. We say the placenta has one vein and the two arteries. So finally, we are done with the lecture. Now, this is the checkpoint. So this is my favorite matching question, which I always like asking students to if they have understood the endocrine system. So this is a matching question where you have to match between and we have to match the uh, column A and column B. So column A is saying anterior lobe of the pituitary gland, the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland, thyroid gland, parathyroid gland, adrenal cortex, adrenomedulla, pancreas, pineal gland. Okay, and here we have vasopressin, thymosin, epinephrine, parathyroid, cortisol, melatonin, calcitonin, prolactin, glucagon. So if you have a pen and a paper, you can pause the video and try to actually answer. Then I'm going to actually give you the answers so that at least you compare out of 8, what are you going to have? Okay, so let's start. So number 1, the pineal gland. So the pineal gland, we said, produces the melatonin. Okay, that's the pineal gland. Second, the parathyroid gland. I said the parathyroid gland is the easiest one. Parathyroid gland, parathyroid or parathormone or parathyroid hormone. That's the other thing we can change from here. Okay. Then adrenal gland, we have epinephrine. We said that the adrenomedulla specifically. So the adrenomedulla is the one which actually produces the fight or flight hormones. Adrenomedulla, epinephrine or adrenaline. Okay, then adrenal cortex, you have the cortisol, where we said adrenal cortex has 3 zones. We have the zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis. Then we say the zona glomerulosa produces the mineralocorticoids such as the cortisol. Okay. Then anterior lobe of the pituitary gland produces the prolactin. Okay. Then the posterior lobe produces what? Vasopressin. Okay. Then lastly, we have the thyroid gland, which produces the calcitonin. So please remember, if there is no T3, T4, calcitonin is a good answer. Then lastly, we have pancreas, which produces glucagon. The pancreas produces glucagon. Then otherwise, that's the end of the lecture. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell notification. And thank you for watching for this 2 hours lecture. And keep on following the channel, and we are about to finish the anatomy and physiology lectures. Okay, so like, share and subscribe. See you on the next